Today we will learn how to paint the Emperor's finest in time for Warhammer 40,000's 9th edition. Hey guys, Angela here, and welcome back to another Hobby Night episode. This week I thought it would be cool to paint a Primaris intercessor because we are building our personal faction of Space Marines for the channel, the Hobby Knights. And so I'm going to show you what color scheme we're using for these boys and how we are painting them. So let's go ahead and start with our priming process, because this week it's a little bit different. I start off with a prime of Chaos Black and then do a small spritz with Corax White over top to give a nice zenithal highlight, which you are seeing here. Basically what that creates is some very bright whites at top and some deeper blacks in the shadows and recesses, which will go very nicely with our contrast paint. The first contrast paint that we are going to apply is Flesh Terror Red, which is going to be our armor color. Now I am, unlike our last video, going to be using a medium shade brush instead of a large shade brush because I do want a bit more control while I'm putting this paint all over basically the entire miniature. The main portions that we're going to skip is the gun and the Auspex in his other hand because we want to keep our highlights clean so that we don't lose any of that detail and we can apply additional colors and really make those stand out later in the miniature. But I do still want a large enough brush to be able to get into all the nooks and crannies, like between his arm, around his helmet, in between his legs and under his backpack to make sure the red gets everywhere. As you can see, we do a pretty good job. He's looking great, and we're going to go ahead and apply some additional colors next. The first of which is Basilicanum Gray. We're going to go ahead and take our small base brush and we're going to apply this to the entire Auspex, avoiding just the screen and the antennae, as well as his entire gun. Now, to be fair, when you're applying this to the gun, you could use a larger brush. I did not, as a silly person. I went ahead and just stuck with my small base brush, but really I could have used a medium shade instead and it would have probably gone a little bit faster, but we use what we have in our hands, and this is what I chose for this portion because I wanted a little bit more control, and sometimes I just do that better with a smaller brush. I made sure that the gray was dry before we picked up our Black Templar, and we're going to now apply this to the Space Marine on all of his trim, pull out some details on his armor and everything, all of the little like black carapace pieces that are underneath the red armor. We're going to do those in black, which includes like all the bits you see in the joints. And we're also going to pull out some details on the gun because I wanted to differentiate a little bit of the metals there, so black is a good way to do that. Here is what I've accomplished so far. We've applied the red to the armor, the black to the trim, and the gray to the gun and the Auspex, and I think he's looking pretty good, so we're going to actually move next to a cleanup stage so we can bring out some additional details. We're going to do that using Gray Sear. I like this tone because it's relatively neutral, and I just wanted something that will go on clean and kind of apply as a mid-tone gray, which I think will work with our black and white that we'd use for our original primer. So we're going to put this on all the leather bits. We're going to bring out the Aquila, of course, on his chest, as well as the skull and wing on the side of the gun, as well as a couple other details like his eyes. We really want to make sure that we have our additional contrast paint that we're putting on him to be a lot brighter, so we don't want to put these over top the red, which is why we end up doing this cleanup stage. We won't have our zenithal highlight anymore, but ultimately I don't think that is going to be super noticeable because these are all small details and the armor is really what we want the zenithal to be very noticeable on. And as you can see, the cleanup is done, he's looking great, and we can now move on to our final colors before moving on to the base. There are 6 final colors that I have in mind to pull out all of the detail on our Space Marine here, and the first one is going to be Iyanden Yellow, which we will apply to both the Aquila as well as the wing and skull on the side of the gun. I'm going to use Talassar Blue to just pop his eyes and tie him into some of our other Marines that we've painted. Hint hint, we'll see those later. I'm going to use Snakebite Leather to, of course, do all of the leather details around his waist. I'm going to actually use Warp Lightning on the Purity Seal as well as the Auspex screen because I think that'll be a nice pop against our red. And then we're going to use Blood Angel's Red on the Auspex antennae, as well as I'm going to put it on the gun to add a little bit additional detail, because I want his gun to be from Mars and made by the Mechanicus. So that is the deal with that. And then our final color will be Skeleton Horde, which we're going to put on the Purity Seal's like parchment portion. And those are our 6 final colors for our Space Marine before we move on to our last bit, which is the basing. At this point, I was really excited because other than his wash, our Marine is basically done and he's looking fantastic. Speaking of our wash, we're going to go ahead and take Nuln oil here and just apply this to basically the entire miniature. We want to make sure that he is consistent throughout. You might also notice that I've pre-primed his base black so that I can apply my basing materials here in a bit. I made sure to give the miniature plenty of time after we did our Nuln oil shade so that he would just be perfectly dry, and as you can see, his recesses are filled in and he's really starting to pop. I chose to hold off on applying my basing material to the miniature until after I had already done my Nuln oil shade, because unlike my Death Guard, I actually don't want to use the Nuln oil on the Astrogranite, which is what we're going to use as our texture paint. We're going to apply that very thinly all over the entire miniature, and then our next step, I'll show you what shade we actually will be using. The shade that I chose is Biel-Tan green, and I really wanted to go for sort of a marshy look on their base, and I think this color really accomplishes that effect, as you will see momentarily. So with the final wash done, the only thing that was left was to tuft and rim his base, and here he is. Doesn't he look great? Now, I have actually not painted a full Space Marine. This is my first one. I mean, the Plague Marines, yes, I guess that technically counts, but like for the Imperium of Man, this is the first Space Marine I've completely finished, and I think he came out great. I love our color scheme. I love the color we went with the ground. It really makes the red pop, which is exactly what I wanted. The new zenithal technique that we've been using to do the priming has worked out beautifully. We're getting even better highlights with our contrast paint, which I really, really love, and I cannot wait to show you guys this faction completed and what we have ready for our 25 power games. So I hope you guys have really enjoyed this. I certainly have enjoyed painting him, and I will see you guys next time. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you guys next week for some more news and another painting video.